Comrades and friends, welcome to the program Global Weekly News, serial number 189. Before going to the program, I want to convey the sad news of my wife's death on 2nd February due to the prolonged blood cancer effects. You see, comrades, the humanity is dutiful to find out a proper vaccine to prevent all types of cancer. But today, the humanity is involved in wars and armaments and is going for super profits by arms sales and all that. These are all very, very harmful to the progress of the humanity. Second, I want to point out, there were 15 blood transfusions to save my wife during the 1.5 years. You do not know whose blood is that, which religion, which caste, whether male or female, you don't know. So, even the caste and religious chauvinist fellows, they don't look for blood from their own caste or from their own religion. So this is all the hard reality. Comrades, my wife and myself, my marriage life is 54 years, 54 long years. So I feel very sad about the demise of my beloved wife. Anyhow, life is like that. We have to carry on. At the time of death, she was 76 years old and I am 78 years old. Until my last breath, I will serve the movement. Thank you for listening these words. Now I proceed to Global Weekly News, serial number 189. First item, comrades. Left parties in India call for solidarity with Cuba. CPIM, CPI, CPI-ML Liberation, Forward Bloc and RSP have issued a joint statement on 1st February expressing complete solidarity with the people of Cuba facing unprecedented threats from the Trump administration. After the attack on Venezuela and kidnapping of President Nicolas Maduro and First Lady Cilia Flores, the US is now proceeding against Cuba by threatening countries which supply it oil with sanctions. The move is against all norms of international politics and the UN Charter and must be condemned, the left party's joint statement declared. The left parties asserted and called on the Indian people to rally in defense of Cuba's sovereign rights. Though all US administrations have maintained economic and political blockades and sanctions on Cuba since the revolution in 1859, Donald Trump, in his first and second terms, has escalated attacks against Cuba to an unprecedented level. In Trump's first term, he reversed the modest progress made during the Obama-led period, adding Cuba back to the US unilaterally determined state sponsors of terrorism list and imposing hundreds of new sanctions. In the last week of Biden's administration, Joe Biden removed Cuba from the list of terrorist states, which was quickly reversed by Trump on day 1 of his second term. Prior to the 3rd January attack, the Trump administration had imposed a naval blockade on Venezuela, impeding it from sending fuel to Cuba. On 28 January, Trump, in an executive order, declared Cuba an unusual and extraordinary threat to US national security and issued a blanket threat of additional tariffs on countries that sell oil to Cuba. The left parties noted in the statement that the people of Cuba have historically resisted all earlier attempts, and we are confident that they will resist the current aggression as well. Noting how the heroic nation of Cuba has consistently stood for international solidarity and assisted countries by sending doctors and medical personnel in times of need, and readily shared its medical expertise and vaccines with many countries in the global south. The left parties asserted that attacking such a noble country should be considered an attack on the entire humanity itself. The left parties also demanded the Indian government to come out and make a clear stand against the US aggression in Cuba and stand in solidarity with the people of Cuba. Second item, comrades. Iran and United States agreed to fresh round of nuclear talks in Oman. Another round of Iran-US talks will begin on 6th February in Muscat, Oman, confirmed Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. The indirect talks will be mediated by Oman. The US delegation will be led by the White House Special Envoy for the Middle East, Steve Witkoff. The Iranian delegation will be led by its Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. Iran and United States carried out 5 rounds of talks last year over Iran's nuclear program and lifting of US sanctions. The talks were discontinued after the US joined Israel in launching airstrikes inside Iran in June. Israel bombed three of Iran's nuclear sites. The new round of talks are being held amidst a large deployment of US troops to the region and repeated threats caused by Trump of a possible military strike. Iran has outrightly denied any possibility of including its missile program or regional policies, claiming the talks on 6th February would only be focused on its nuclear program and finding ways for lifting illegal sanctions imposed by the US. So far, the Trump administration has insisted Iran completely end its nuclear program. Iran has agreed to limitations but refused to outrightly give up its nuclear enrichment program, claiming it is for peaceful purposes and within its rights under the International Nuclear Regime or the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. In 2015, nuclear deal was signed between Iran and United States, 5 permanent members of the United Nations plus Germany. Though they had initially opposed Trump's unilateral withdrawal from the deal in 2018 and attempted to get the deal back to track, they later joined the US and imposed their own sanctions on Iran, echoing American allegations of its violations of the provisions of the now defunct Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. Third item, comrades. Jordan will not be a launch pad for any military action against Iran. Jordan's Minister of Foreign Affairs revealed in a statement on X on 2nd February that he discussed the situation in the region and the efforts being made to de-escalate tensions with his Iranian counterpart Abbas Araghchi. The Jordan minister declared that he asserted during his discussion with Araghchi the necessity of adopting dialogue and diplomacy as the path of reaching a peaceful resolution for the nuclear issue and ending the tension. He confirmed that Jordan will not be a battlefield for any party in any regional conflict or a launch pad for any military action against Iran, and it will confront with all its capabilities any attempt to breach its airspace and threaten the safety of the Jordanian citizens. These statements came 1 week after an Israeli media report claimed that Jordan, alongside the United Arab Emirates and the United Kingdom, may provide logistical and intelligence supports to the US military in its intended aggression against Iran. The General Secretary of the Jordanian Democratic Popular Unity Party welcomed the stand of Jordan government. Iran has demonstrated remarkable decisiveness and defiance in its reaction to the US threats during the last few weeks. General Secretary maintained that Iran's threats target US military bases in host countries access West Asia. General Secretary, Jordanian Democratic Popular Unity Party General Secretary maintained that Iran's threats to target US military bases in host countries across West Asia in the event of any US aggression may have pushed these countries, including Jordan, to distance itself from being engaged in prospective war. Fourth item, comrades. New wave of solidarity with Venezuela sweeps Italy. 1 month after the US attack on Venezuela, dozens of Italian cities once again took to the streets in support of the Bolivarian process, demanding the release of President Nicolas Maduro and Celia Flores. Organized under the international slogan, "Bring them back home," the decentralized actions represent a stepping stone towards a National Assembly in Rome on 8 February, as well as permanent mobilization against war and rearmament. Students and youth made up a significant portion of participants in 3rd February demonstrations. Left groups also denounced the Trump administration's threats and attacks against other countries in Latin America, particularly Cuba and Colombia, warning that the strategy is rooted in a model of imperialism that harms all people all over the world. Latin America does not bow to US imperialist ambitions. It resists, as shown by massive crowds in Caracas, fighting loudly for the release of President Nicolas Maduro and Celia Flores. Caracas is the capital of Venezuela. Fifth item, comments. Government and World Bank responsible for displacement in Pakistan. Hundreds of people belonging to indigenous communities in the location Dera Ghazi Khan in Pakistan's Punjab province gathered on the banks of Tamsa Barrage on the Indus River to condemn the demolition of their homes by the local authorities and assert their rights of inhabitation. The gathering was called a People's Tribunal, organized by the Save Indus Demand and other organizations. Punjab Encroachment Regulatory Authority, the police and the local government used violence against the people. The People's Tribunal, in its final judgment, demanded the cessation of all displacements and adequate compensation for the displaced. It also demanded a public apology for causing harm to the people and the local environment, holding the government and the World Bank equally responsible. The judgment also questioned the existing legal regimes which declare people who have been living on the land and using its natural resources for generations illegal encroachers. Nearly 70 houses belonging to various indigenous communities who have lived on the land for generations were demolished with bulldozers last week. Hundreds of women, children and elderly were forced to spend nights in the open in severe winter conditions. The people's access to the river was also blocked and their boats were seized, depriving them of a major source of livelihood. Most of the people whose houses were demolished belong to extremely poor indigenous communities like fisher folk and basket weavers. Most people had all the necessary government documents to prove their residence. According to claims made by the activists, the government wants to build a circuit house on the land thus vacated. Similar displacements took place in the 1950s as well, when the present Tamsa Barrage was constructed. The tribunal claimed the World Bank, which was the sponsor of the project, failed to implement its own resettlement plan promise. Sixth item, comrades, now we go to Argentina. The police in Argentina violently repressed pensioners and their supporters once again in Buenos Aires on 4th February. Pensioners, among the most affected groups in the country, have been regularly protesting against the right-wing government of Argentina and its IMF-backed budget cuts. Many say, despite working their entire lives, they now have to decide between buying food or medicine. Seventh item, US deploys 3 warships to Haiti. The United States Embassy in Haiti announced the arrival of 3 warships in the Caribbean country's capital, Port-au-Prince. Operation Southern Spear was publicly announced in November 2025 and includes the deployment of military forces to Latin America, according to the Pentagon, to combat vessels used by drug traffickers and narco-terrorist cartels. The airstrikes on vessels in the Caribbean and the Pacific as part of Operation Southern Spear has already left more than 100 people dead. According to the US Embassy in Haiti, the arrival of the US warships is related to security activities. Their presence reflects the US unwavering commitment to Haiti's security, stability, and brighter future. The US Navy and the US Coast Guard reaffirmed their partnership and support to ensure a safer and more prosperous Haiti. It is important to remember that 7th February marks the end of the mandate of the Presidential Transition Council, a body created to govern the island in the face of political volatility. The end of the mandate on 7th February has created a lot of internal tension in the country, and Washington's move would be seen as a way to ensure a transition favorable to US interests. United States recently announced new visa restrictions on senior Haitian government officials who, according to Washington, are linked to gangs operating on the island. Haiti is currently experiencing a severe security crisis due to fighting for control by rival gangs. In 2021, the president of Haiti, Jovenel Moïse, was assassinated by foreign mercenaries. Nearly 2 lakh people have been displaced as a result of the violence. Several countries launched the so-called Multinational Security Support Mission in Haiti, through which troops from various countries, especially Kenya, would carry out control tasks. The United Nations decided to send a new multinational force to Haiti. Many Haitians are skeptical about its performance. Lastly, comrades, we go to Africa. Floods in Mozambique. Mozambique is grappling with one of its worst flood disasters in recent years after weeks of heavy rainfall, compounded by emergency dam water releases, left vast parts of the country submerged, killing several people and affecting hundreds of thousands of people. The infrastructure loss itself is a tune of $64.4 crore. United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, reported that 513,000 people have been affected, over half of them children. 50,000 people have been forced to flee from their homes. 83,000 peasant producers are affected. Food insecurity is on the rise. Thank you, comrades. Lal Salam. See you next week.